The UFC returns to Brick City, Newark, New Jersey this Saturday night, and it is an unbelievable main event. A couple other really good fights. It's UFC 302. It's the reigning, defending, undisputed UFC lightweight champion, Islam Makhachev, defending his title against Dustin Poirier, the legend, the former interim champion, and the guy that is looking to finish his story. We'll get into that just a little bit later, but I wanted to start off and talk about the third fight from the top, which is Kevin Holland, who's moving up to middleweight to fight Michelle Oleksiejczuk in this bout. He fought at welterweight a couple times after having a really successful 2020 at middleweight, where we saw Kevin Holland dominate 5-0 that year, but he's coming off of two losses against really tough competition. He lost to Michael Venom Page in his debut. He lost to Jack Dell. That one was on short notice, but that's what we love about Kevin Holland. He'll fight anybody, anytime, any place, anywhere. He's always ready to fight. It doesn't even matter the weight class. He'll fight in either. He's always reliable for the UFC. And it's crazy to think about that. He's only 31 years old and he's fought so much. And in this fight against Oleksiejczuk, he is a minus 300 favorite to Mihaly's plus 240 underdog in this fight. Kevin Holland is a bigger guy against some of these guys, even at middleweight. He's 6'3", going up against Oleksiejczuk, who's 6 foot tall, and Kevin Holland is, for me, due for a big win. He hasn't won it, like I said, he hasn't won in his past two. His last win came by submission when he submitted Michael Chiesa back last July. That one was a shocker, surprised a bunch of people. But in this fight, he has the height advantage. He has the reach advantage, 81 inches over 74. I think he's going to knock Michal Oleksiejczuk out. I think he's going to do it in the second round. I think it's going to be a pretty spectacular one. Kevin Holland said he's looking for one. He said when he's at 185, he feels more comfortable when he's heavier. And yeah, so I think Kevin Holland will win that fight. But a fight that got moved from the main card that I was really looking forward to is Jolton Almeida, who's ranked number 7 in the world, taking on Alexander Romanov, who is ranked number 13 in the world in the heavyweight division. But Jolton Almeida, I think people are sleeping on him just a little bit. He lost his last fight. He looked like he was taking Curtis Blades down back in March and UFC 299, and Blades just continued to hit him with a bunch of strikes in a row and knocked him out, finished him, stopped that fight. But before that, Jolton Almeida, he at one point he had 5 or 6 straight finishes in a row in the UFC. He submitted Jairzinho Rosenstrike, and he beat Derek Lewis, were two of his marquee victories. They weren't some of the most exciting fights, especially the one against Lewis. But I think Jolton Almeida, he still is a younger guy. I really think that he is one of the best young prospects in this heavyweight division. But I think this is a really favorable matchup going against Romanov. He's a plus 260 favorite in this one. He's 2 years older. He's coming off of a win against Ivanov, and then he got knocked out by Alexander Volkov last year. And this is a really competitive, tough fight. And I think that he will kind of test Jolton when he tries to take him down. I don't think it will be super easy, but I think that Jolton Almeida will finish Alexander Romanov. I think he's going to finish him in the first round, actually. Late in the first round, that is. That's a really good fight to look out for on the prelims. The prelims are really good on this one. The main event of the prelims is Cesar Almeida, who is taking on Roman Kopylov, who's a really good fighter as well. Almeida's 36 years old. He's only 1-0 in the UFC, but had a really impressive knockout back just a couple months ago. And people might not know this, but Cesar Almeida actually fought the UFC light heavyweight champion Alex Pieda multiple times. He actually beat him once. He lost to him twice. So he's a very high level striker, a very high level kickboxer. I don't know of what level he can get to, but I think he's going to be in big fights early in his career, as he's only in his second fight fighting Kopylov, who is a really good fighter in the UFC. Has been in the UFC since 2019. He lost to Fluffy Anthony Hernandez in his last fight, but had four really impressive knockouts before that one. I think Caesar is the favorite at -120. I think he's going to knock him out in the third round. I think it's going to be an incredible fight. One of the best fights of this night, I think, and I think it's one of the fights that some people are sleeping on. But let's get into the co-main event. Let's not wait any longer. It's the #1 ranked UFC middleweight in the world. The former undisputed middleweight champion Sean Strickland is taking on Borrachinha Paulo Costa, the 7th ranked middleweight in the world, who's coming off of a loss just a couple months ago to Robert Whittaker. That was a close decision loss. It was Paulo's first fight in the last year and a half, and it was only his 7th fight in the past 7 years. And this fight is going to be the first time that we see Paulo Costa in the UFC octagon for 2 times in a single calendar year since 2017. So a long time for Paulo, but I really like that Paulo's getting back active in the octagon. And I think the more we see of him and the more octagon time that he has, I think it's only going to be beneficial for himself. But he's going up against Sean Strickland, who's on quite the run. As we know, the big upset, one of the biggest championship upsets of all time, when he beat Israel Adesanya for the middleweight championship back in September. And then this past January in Canada, he lost his championship to Dricus Du Plessis. Some people thought it was controversial. I gave the nod to Du Plessis. I didn't see any controversy there. Strickland looked good. He didn't look as good and as great as he looked against Izzy, that's for sure. But this is just a high level striking matchup. Sean Strickland, to me, is the better all-around striker in this matchup. But I think Paulo Costa has that one-shot power, that one punch power that can put someone's lights out in the blink of an eye. And we know Sean Strickland doesn't have that power. If he lands clean, we saw that he can put somebody down like he did to Izzy, but that's not his game. He's really about punches and bunches and kind of wearing down his opponent and playing the long game. This does favor Sean Strickland. It is a 5-round fight, so I do think that favors them. But both guys pretty, when you look at their builds, they're pretty equal. They're both 6'1" tall. Sean Strickland has a 3-inch advantage, or 4-inch advantage, my bad, on the reach department. So he's a little longer there. I don't think there'll be much wrestling in this one. Paulo maybe could try to and use some ground and pound here and there. I think that would benefit him a ton, actually. But to me, when this fight got announced and I saw the line, I know Sean Strickland's the former champ of just a couple months ago. I know he's ranked #1 and Paulo's ranked #7, and Paulo hasn't won a fight in quite some time. He's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. Last beat Luke Rockhold in August of 2022, so almost 2 years ago was his last win. But we do know who he fought. He fought Robert Whittaker. He fought Israel Adesanya. Those are 2 of the best middleweights of all time. So there's no shame of losing to those 2. But getting back to the odds, Sean Strickland's a -245 and Paulo Costa is a +200. I think Paulo's a really live underdog in this fight. A +200 to me is just crazy odds, because when this got announced and put together, I thought this fight was as close to even and equal as really one gets. I really think people are favoring that Sean's accomplishment against Izzy, but as we've seen, that isn't the Sean Strickland we see all the time. We don't see a guy who's always has his foot on the gas and always pushes the pace. Normally, Sean Strickland is inactive, actually, and he's not as aggressive. So I think if we see the normal Sean Strickland, I really think Paulo has a great shot. And also, we have to start to think about Sean Strickland and his place in the sport, because I know he's ranked number one. He is a former champion. That can't be taken away. That forever stands. He's always gonna have that gold back at his house. That's for sure. But if Sean Strickland loses this one, that means he would have lost two of his last three and his last two fights. And like I said, I know the last one had a little bit of controversy tied to it, but then again, the Sean Strickland that we knew before he upsetted Izzy is a guy who does get big wins, but also is just not consistent, just can't do it time in and again. And that's what we could be seeing. If he loses to Paulo Costa, a title shot is not in the near future, and we maybe could never see it again. So I think that people want to say all the pressure's on Costa because he has lost two of three, but I actually think that Sean Strickland has a ton of pressure, because although his stardom has continued to raise and become bigger every single fight he has, the one thing that you need to do in this sport is win. If you don't win, none of the other stuff matters, as we know. But for my pick for this fight, I think Paulo Costa is going to beat Sean Strickland. I think it's going to be a third or fourth round knockout. I think he's going to knock out Sean Strickland. I think it's going to be a really exciting fight up until that point. I really do. I think both guys are going to be pretty banged up, maybe even a little bloody up until that point. But moving on to the main event, this is the one I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. I've been looking forward to this for since the time this fight got announced. This is an unbelievable main event. It's Islam Makhachev, as I said, the undisputed UFC lightweight champion, taking on Dustin Poirier, El Diamante himself. The Diamond will take his third crack at an undisputed championship in the UFC. As we know, he did win the interim championship back in 2019 against Max Holloway, but as he said it himself, the thing that he has wanted to achieve since he laced up those gloves at 18 years old and committed his life to this sport was winning that undisputed UFC championship. But before we get into how I think the fight's going to go and my prediction, let's take a little step back and see and talk about how we got here, because four things needed to happen for Dustin to get this title shot. Because Dustin, last July, let's not forget, he got brutally knocked out by Justin Gaethje, and then he followed it up. He fought an up-and-comer, a guy outside the top 10 in Benoit Saint Denis, back in March in Miami, and he knocked him out in the second round. Was a great finish. The first round was a little close, but Dustin got the job done as an underdog in that one. He always, as an underdog, continues to shine. But the four things that needed to happen: the first, he needed to beat Benoit Saint Denis, as I've just said. Number two, Max Holloway needed to beat Justin Gaethje, and he did just that in spectacular fashion. The third thing, Arman Tsarukyan needed to beat Charles Oliveira. That happened. But then the fourth and most important thing is Arman needed to turn down a fight for the undisputed title against Islam on short notice, which he did. He was offered the fight. Arman was backstage after he beat Oliveira at UFC 300. He said he didn't want to do it. He wanted to rest up and make sure he's 100% when he gets that next shot against Islam or at the championship for a first time. They call the most reliable guy. Dustin Poirier never takes a fight, never turns an option down, never turns down a title fight. And there's just a lot surrounding this fight, a lot of pressure. Is this Dustin's last fight? I don't think it is. If he wins 100%, it's not. Even if he loses, I just think Dustin, he said even when he loses the fight, he takes a couple days with his family, and then he just wants that next date on the calendar to get back in there. But this fight is just amazing. It's taking place in Brick City, as I said, in Newark, New Jersey. And a quick fact, fighters that are 35 years or older fighting for a lightweight championship in the UFC are 0-15. And Dustin is 6-0 in the month of June in his career, 2-0 in the tri-state area while fighting here. This is his third fight in the tri-state area. Dustin's 31st UFC fight. Islam Makhachev, though, as we know, has been dominant, knocked out Volk back in October, and last February he beat Volk for the first time. That Volk fight was one of the best fights I've ever seen. Unbelievable. I thought Volk got the job done in that one. A little bit of controversy in that one, but he beat him. We know how Islam won the vacant title. It was against Charles Oliveira when he submitted him in the second round. The one thing, although Islam has been completely dominant, hasn't shown much signs of weakness besides that first Volk fight, we have to take a step back and just realize what the truth is. And the truth is that Islam hasn't defended the title against a true lightweight. He did fight Volk. Volk is an all-time great. Was number one versus number two pound for pound in the rankings at the time. But that was more of like a dream fight of a guy moving up, a guy that's a great in another division. So this to me is also a test because this is Islam's first time defending the title against a true 155 pounder, a legend of the lightweight division, one of the best lightweights of all time without a doubt. He's beat Max, he's beat Gaethje, he's beat Conor McGregor 2 times. As we know, the last one, Conor got injured, still got the job done, still revenged his loss of over a decade ago. So the last thing on the check box of Dustin's career is the undisputed title. Will he finish his story? We've been talking about it, comparing it to Cody Rhodes in the WWE. He finished his story back in WrestleMania 40 in April. And I'm going to go with the upset in this fight. Although Islam looked amazing in his last fight, he fought a Volk on short notice. He didn't fight Volk at 100% in that second fight. Islam's stand-up is better than Khabib's, but his takedowns and his overall submissions are not as dominant, not as good as Khabib was. I don't really think they should be compared because I think Khabib is on a different level. Some people think Islam's on that level. We'll find out. But I think Dustin, it's been building to it, and I think he's going to get the job done. I think Dustin Poirier is going to raise Undisputed Gold above his head in Brick City, in Newark, New Jersey, at the Prudential Center on Lafayette Street on Saturday night. I think it's going to be the fairy tale ending that Dustin has wished for. He has his own custom shorts with the florals and the diamond on his shorts. I really think this is Dustin's time. I'm not slighting Islam by any mean. I'm not counting Islam out by any mean. He's the big favor at -600 to Dustin plus 400. But as we saw, like I said, back in September, when Sean Strickland beat Izzy, anything can happen in this sport. When you're locked in that cage, anybody can beat anybody. And I think Dustin is going to be that guy. I think he's going to be the one to beat Islam. But overall, I can't wait for this one. This fight, this card, this will be excellent. Tune in Saturday night to see if Dustin will indeed finish his story.